Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Roundtable. It's great to see you all, and I'm excited about our topic today. We're going to discuss coaching versus therapy. And as often as not, we find clients, they might be saying coaching and therapy rather than one or the other, but we're going to explore that today. Before I do that, we invite you from a Life Design to put our team of coaches in your corner. And that's easy to do because you just become a free member of our community. And we'll include that link in the discussion below. Okay, so we usually start with slides. And so here we go. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to look at some slides because we want to, kick off the topic with some food for thought. So I'm going to put this in present mode so it looks a little better if it lets me do that. Here we go. Okay. So when I did a search for images around therapy, this is what came up. But we know as coaches, there could also be a coaching meeting. Though I don't make people take their shoes off for my coaching meetings. They're mostly on Zoom. But anyway, this could be thought of as a therapy meeting, or it could be thought as a coaching meeting. And as we'll learn as we talk, there's lots of therapists who also do coaching. So there's some crossover between. This I thought looked more like a coaching meeting because they were looking at something specific on the screen, and it might be around business or a strategy that's being executed or looking at possibilities of what could happen next. So just as an overview and area of discussion, in coaching, sometimes the discussions around what is your plan, what is your timeline? Whether your plan is to move to a new city, or your plan is to get a divorce, or your plan is to adopt children, whatever that plan is, coaching is around taking action steps. What are the things that you could do in order to make this plan or this goal of yours come into life for you? Um, we can talk about delegating. Do you have allies at work who could help you win the new assignment? Do you have people in your life who would help you move so that you don't have to spend so much money on a mover? Do you have someone who can help you explore how they planned their retirement compared to how you're planning yours? So, to delegate or to get support around something can be part of a coaching plan. And then commonly action steps. Here's 3 things that you could do. Which of these things would you like to do first? These are the kinds of coaching conversations. Coaching also discusses possibility. So what if you could sit down with HR and find out, is there an opportunity for you to work in a different department? If that possibility is available, would you rather pursue that? Or would you rather pursue leaving the company because the culture is just no longer supportive of who you are? So, let's explore what the possibilities are. Could we do both? Yes, we could. So, and then looking at therapy, so many great therapists in the world, and there's a lot of new therapy that's online. So the way you would have a Zoom coaching meeting, you can now have Zoom therapy meetings. So you don't have to physically go to a place. And I think one of the gifts of the pandemic was freeing people to work remotely through screens. There's a lot more possibility for people. In therapy conversations, they might talk about, let's look at the choices you made when you were presented with this change. Your husband or wife asks for a divorce. Your child is diagnosed with a challenge of some kind. Let's look at what your choices are. Or they can discuss your feelings. Why do you resent your coworker? Let's explore that. So in coaching, there's not a lot of feeling based. It can happen, but it's not usually the deep dive that coaches take. But it is commonly a deep dive that therapists would take. And then exploring your options in terms of therapy. I also think, and then we'll go to our memes and our discussion. It's the questions that are asked that might define whether you're sitting in front of a coach or sitting in front of a therapist. With a coach, and they say, what are your options? It might be, these are the steps you could take. Well, first, let people in your network know that you got laid off and you're looking for a job. Is that 10 people or 15 people? Let's take a minute and construct how you might send that message out. And then while we're in the meeting, send the message out. Take the step now. In a therapy meeting, your options might be, well, have you thought about how your needs are being met in your current circumstance? And then what needs you have that are not being met. Whether your needs are being met is commonly not a coaching question, but commonly a therapy question. And for some people, therapists ask questions, why is it your responsibility to do that? Why are you in a situation where your needs are not being met? How did we arrive at this place? Those kinds of explorations are, more of a therapy discussion. So, okay, let's go to our memes. These were fun looking for these. So, here's the therapist meme. The therapist says, what do we say to people to let them know we're welcoming them into our lives? And the patient says, buckle up. And therapist says, no, that's not what we say. Here's one for coaching. I ate one brownie today instead of the entire pan. Pretty sure I'm a life coach now. Here's one about coaching. There's a person sitting with a thought bubble that's just a bunch of tangled string. And the coach on the other side of the table is taking all that string and putting it on a dowel so that it's straightened out. Here's all my confusing thoughts. Okay, let's just straighten those out. Then the last one, and I thought this was perfect for Austin, Texas, because we have taco culture, taco trucks, tacos for breakfast, tacos for dinner. The therapist says, tacos are not antidepressants. The client says, all I'm saying is I've never been less happy while holding a taco. Therapist, for the last time, I can't get your insurance to cover tacos. The client says, don't yell at me. You need a taco. So the last thought I wanted to share was I was reading a Substack this morning talking about the black pilling culture, where people are sharing negative thoughts. They do some doom scrolling. Oh, humanity's lost. And his thought was in his personal life, he embraces his agency. Agency is something that both coaches and therapists talk about. The ability to make meaningful choices in coaching, maybe meaningful changes, is key to maintaining psychological well-being, even in the face of broader societal challenges. It's important to narrow the scope of one's focus to what can one do to impact one's own life. So this is what's happening out here. Let's bring ourselves back to what's happening right here and what can we do about it. So thank you so much for enjoying those slides. And here we'll get into some discussion. Perhaps we've given you some food for thought. For those that are watching, we have in our description links to the research we did to put this session together. So you might explore those topics about coaching and/or therapy. Brian, let's start with you. Welcome today from Vietnam. You have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks for your opening. That was good. Yeah, coaching versus therapy. I think it's an interesting topic. Dean, I think you were the inspiration for this topic. You brought it up at some point. So looking at some of the articles that you sent to us earlier in prep for this, it was talking about how therapy is a lot about emotions and relationships. It tends to focus on those two things. Whereas coaching could really be anything. It could really go into any area that you want to improve in. There could be a coach who specializes in that area. So any area like where you want to improve, it could be business coaching, it could be life coaching, it could be who knows what else. I mean, we have a retirement coach, it could be, like any different direction. So that's one way to look at it. Like the article is also saying therapists tend to look at the past more, like dealing with past traumas, trying to sort those out. Coaches are more about how can we design the future you want to have.
Mhm.
It's there's more of a focus there, not that they can't exist in both, but the focus is more how do we build the future you want in coaching. And yeah, I was also talking about how coaching tends to be more of a co-creative relationship. It's not as much of a doctor-patient relationship, which I think is good. And I do think coaching overall is more adaptable. Whereas with therapy, you kind of you've been trained, you sort of have to stick within those modalities,
Mhm.
stick within sort of the mainstream psychological understanding of things. You might have to stick to the DSM, stick to certain, protocols. And if none of that works, maybe you go to like medication. I think that's kind of the process there. Whereas in coaching, if something's not working, we would just try a different strategy, you know. Um, so there are some coaches now who are like high ticket sales who like really want to charge you all this money. But apart from those types of coaches, I sort of think, and I'm totally cool with therapists and therapy, but I sort of think coaching is sometimes a little bit more honest because there's a little bit more of an incentive to create a recurring client as a therapist, right? So there's sort of an incentive problem there. So if you come in, like if someone comes into you and you're a therapist and you just solve all the problems in their life in 3 weeks, then that's it, right? Like you actually kind of have to have the problems keep going on, but we sort of make progress, but there's still more to work on, but we make some progress, but there's still more to work on. And I do think that's fundamentally an incentive problem with that. So there might be coaches who do that as well. So it's not exclusive, but I think it's more honest. If you work with someone and they say, look, let's try to get your problem knocked out as soon as we can. Here's my fee. And that's it. If you ever need something else, you know how to reach out back to me and we can work again. I think that's a more honest way to approach it, but that's just me. Um, let's see. So one of the like visions I have for ALD, one of the concepts that I want to bring forward is I think it's really cool to have a team of coaches or almost like a team of mentors who can help you in different areas of your life. And that's something you can't really get with a therapist, although therapists can help people. I'm not trying to be against that, but I think it's cool if you get a team of people in your corner, like you were saying, and you have several different people you can reach out to whenever you're having a problem or having an issue, and they can help you in different ways and in different areas of your life. I think if we start creating communities where people have access to something like that, I think that's hugely empowering for people. So that's part of the vision that I want to share behind this. Um, let's see. Yeah, but in general, I do think sort of creating communities like ALD and these types of things is good because we sort of need to, I think, change the business model. I mean, a lot of therapists charge a lot of money now too, as well. $100, $200, $300 a session. And then you're going once, twice a month, maybe more. Who is that for? Like, that's not for, let's say, the average low class to middle class person. That's kind of only serving people that are on like in a higher income tier. I think it's good to try to create ways to make these sort of things available to everyone. Um, and again, that's part of my vision, for this as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, another interesting thing that I've heard some people argue. Again, I'm not trying to cause too much controversy with this either, but I've heard some people argue that therapy nowadays, it tends to be more female centric.
Mhm.
So I actually heard, I think it was a psychologist in a video talking about how even the way that psychology talks about like depression now is really more oriented towards the way women experience depression. It's really not oriented towards male depression as much, which is a different thing.
Mhm.
Because for one, more women seek out therapy. So they're getting more data from that.
Mhm.
And two, I believe it's about 75% of therapists now in the US are women.
Mhm.
So it's more of, we usually hear a lot about how things favor men, but this is a case where the energy, the focus is more going towards women's way of experiencing emotional difficulties.
Mhm.
And so maybe for some men, they might be better off with a coach. One thing I've heard from some men is like some men will say like talking about their feelings doesn't really help them.
Mhm.
Now I think it can, but there are some guys who are very like solution oriented.
Mhm.
Like they're not going to feel better until something actually like physically changes
Mhm.
in the situation or in the external world.
Mhm.
And like they're kind of they reserve feeling better until something has actually changed in whatever specific problem they have. Now, if you're that guy and you go to a therapist and you just talk about feelings, well, how do you feel about this? Well, that might not help you. And again, I'm not against therapy. I've acknowledged it can help a lot of people.
Mhm.
But I think that's an interesting point to bring out there. For someone like that, a coach might be better because you're looking for more of a solution oriented process as opposed to just like a process of venting your feelings and somehow getting some kind of emotional resolution there and just feeling better. And therapists can also offer other insights and life strategies as well,
Mhm.
or communication strategies. So there's crossover, but so yeah, that's what I would say to get it started here, kick it off.
Very good. Thank you so much. And Dean, so let us know your thoughts about this.
Well, all right. I'm going to say something provocative. So
Okay.
just
Go for it.
everybody just hold on.
Buckle up.
Yeah. The difference between coaches and therapists is that therapists are endorsed by the state and by the insurance companies.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's the fundamental difference. And what that means is like what Brian was saying is that the um the spectrum of say healing modalities that are available to therapists
Mhm.
are much more limited
Yes.
because they have to do because they are in a way part of a system that's designed by um, psychiatrists and the drug companies and the state
Yeah.
and the educational institutions.
Yes.
Okay. And so, the the surface level assumption is supposed to be that, well, if your therapist went to graduate school, spent 2 years in a counseling degree program, came out and got a license, well, now you know that this is quality. But the reality is that the the sort of therapy industry or the mental health industry is in utter disarray right now. If
Yeah.
it weren't, coaching wouldn't be booming.
Yes.
I follow on Twitter and a man named Jonathan Shedler, who is a professor of psychology at the University of California,
Yeah.
who routinely says every day there is no such thing any longer as therapy. There's no agreement about what therapy is.
Okay.
And so this none of this is to say therapy can't be helpful to people, but I think we're way past just societally and culturally any agreement on what therapy even really is,
Yes.
right? And that and unfortunately, just lots and lots of therapists have social media now to sort of put themselves forward and market themselves. And you can see how shallow a lot of their thinking is about kind of the human condition and human struggles, and a lot of it is doing worksheets and learning techniques for calming yourself down, which no doubt is helpful to people.
Yes.
but that's not the same thing as a deep, it's not the same thing as like deep analysis of yourself.
Yes.
And so I say all of that not to denigrate therapy, but to just get a like a realistic sense of what's really happening. Um, and so so the line between therapy and coaching is um almost arbitrary in the sense that there is no clear definition of therapy, right? If there were, we could be sure we weren't doing it. Um, but it's a gray zone. So, given that, I would say that the really only clear distinction that I can see is that we could say therapists treat mental illness and coaches do not. Okay.
Hmm.
And so a person who's suicidally depressed might go to a therapist.
Hmm.
Um, and okay, so here's a great example. I do with coaching clients, I do like a get to know you call, like short 15-minute get to know you call where I explain how I work and that kind of thing with clients before I actually agree to take them on.
Hmm.
And once or twice, I've had people come and want me to coach them. And it was very clear to me that they had very pronounced and serious mental illness.
Hmm.
And I say, I don't think you need coaching. I think you need a psychiatrist.
Right.
Right. And that I think is the responsible thing to do
Yeah.
when you know that, coaching is not going to be the right path for someone who tells you in your get to know you call that she is hallucinating or that she hears voices or something like that.
Hmm.
And so that that's that's where you refer to a therapist or someone kind of within the mental health industry. And I always like those people I refer to as psychiatrists because you can't kind of go wrong with telling people to go to the doctor, right? Now,
Yeah.
at the same time, because I do so much sort of general personal development coaching and relationship coaching, almost everyone who comes to me with some sort of relationship problem.
Hmm.
I do end up doing a lot of kind of exploration with people of their motivations and their needs and their feelings.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting too. I often, in those short calls, I will have men contact me who who maybe saw like a scene of a couples therapy session in some TV show they were watching with their wives, and they're very nervous because they think that what they're supposed to do is come to me and I don't know, cry.
Be
It,
vulnerable, you know. Hmm.
and um, it kind of goes to what Brian was saying about kind of the different experiences for men and women. That I do think that going to therapy has is for women, and one of the reasons that 75% of therapists are women is probably because a lot of women go to therapy to kind of have the experience of emotional support, right? That they want to speak freely, they want to be heard, they want someone who can like connect with them at that level. And that's a very different thing from what a man wants, right? And so when I'm working with a male client, yes, we talk about his feelings, and this is perhaps the emphasis of coaching, is that those feelings they're nowhere near the end point. So like if I'm working with a man in coaching, we are okay, you feel bad, you have these feelings, etc. Let's talk about what story might you be telling yourself that's creating these feelings that are keeping you from getting what you want.
Hmm.
And so rather than treating mental illness, I think this is what you're saying, those discussions of your feelings, needs, motivations, etc., are kind of framed within the context of how do we improve your performance so that you stop undermining yourself and get what you want.
A
And
part of a
so maybe
solution dynamic.
right.
Hmm.
as opposed to sort of my being there to sort of offer just emotional support and connection.
Hmm.
And and I don't know. I mean, I'm not a woman and I'm not I don't know, but I would expect for a lot of women the appeal of therapy is that sort of the relief of kind of having that emotional support system, so support there that you might not have at other places in your life. Um, Yeah, and so I think at the end, if you're going to say, given all that I've said, if you're going to say what's the difference between coaching and therapy, I would say it has to be something like therapists treat mental illness and coaches look for ways to help you to, in some way, um, increase your level of maturity, your growth, and your performance so that you achieve the goal that you're after.
Very
Uh,
good.
Kind of a long-winded way of saying that, I'm afraid, but that's in the end, that's what it is.
I'll share a little bit of perspective I have with 15 years of coaching and as many years in business consulting. I usually work as an executive coach with people solving a business problem. They want to get ahead at work, they want to start their own business. They're having a problem with the team they manage, that kind of thing. So it's very strongly solution driven. And what are the steps and how to interact with people? Maybe 25% of the referrals I get are for someone who's in the penalty box. This person is disruptive to the team. We've promoted them, but it's not working out. So we don't know if we should demote them or can you help them with their leadership skills? There's some sort of problem with the person within the organization that a coach can take some rough edges off or help clear up communication. But there's always some stuff at the margins that's personal stuff. And here's a great example. I was working with a woman who was managing three software development teams, two of them in the US, one in her state, one in another state, and then an Indian development team in India. She was working day and night because the Indian team was working overnight. She was exhausted. And when she would come into meetings, they would discount her because she's just the woman managing things. They would treat her two steps above the cafeteria lady. And she is kicking ass and taking names in the actual work she's performing, but it's really discounted. She's talked over in meetings. They never check with her to see if this is a good idea. They just give her edicts like she's a waitress taking an order. But the other people get to chime in about strategy or what have you. So she's trying to, get the respect she thinks she deserves for the work she's performing. And she had a particularly difficult boss who would take her ideas, step in a meeting and say they were his, and they would all believe those were his ideas. And she was just taking his direction. It was just driving her crazy. So we go through the steps about how to shift that for her. Okay, these facts are true. Now, how are we going to operate in a way that they're no longer true? What can we do? And so, practical steps. When we were done, the weirdo that was stepping on her was forced out of the company. Her bosses recognized her value and would check with her before they would make changes. She was promoted. So we got all of that ironed out. In our very last meeting, she said, well, we have like 15 minutes left. Can I ask you a personal question? I'm like, of course. And she said, I come from a different culture. I was born and raised in India, now live in the US. And I want to understand the concept that Christians have about forgiveness
Hmm.
because my father is coming to visit from India for 3 weeks, and we've had a very difficult relationship. He raised me in an old school way. So there was quite a bit of what today would be considered violence in the home, where back in the day it was just he had a strong rein on his children. It was nothing to smack them. He was being an appropriate father for his culture and his growing up. I don't know how to forgive him. And I don't know how to stop resenting him. But I've heard about this Christian forgiveness and I want to understand it. And so she did. And she had a great relationship with her father when he came to visit. But coaches can do stuff like EFT. That's what we did. We used this energetic tool or the Sedona method. There are ways that are somatic experiences where they release this pent-up pain, and it's more available to coaching environments than maybe it is in a more prescribed, more controlled therapeutic environment. So, and the woman who taught me how to do EFT was a 25-year psychotherapist here in Austin. And she began doing EFT almost exclusively with her patients because she got results faster. She said she was starting to burn out on being a therapist. She was good at it. She had a good reputation. She did all the schooling, a lot of money in training, but it would take 6 months to kind of get the needle really moved. And she could do that in 2 or 3 sessions with EFT. So she began adding EFT or emotional freedom technique or tapping, that somatic energetic experience to her sessions until finally that's all she did. And so for her, doing a coaching modality was giving the results that she wanted to do. I sat in an International Coaching Federation meeting 5 years ago here in Austin, and it was a time when 50% of the newly minted coaches from the International Coaching Federation were current therapists. 50% of the newly certified were therapists. And it was driven by economics. It had changed that they could not be reimbursed sufficiently from insurance. What insurance would pay for was collapsing. Insurance will let you come with a copay for $20 for 3 sessions. After that, you're on your own. And these therapists had built practices in their business model of accepting insurance so that people could get therapy. And then as the insurance reimbursements are collapsing, they couldn't make the lease payments on their offices. They're like joining offices, and it wasn't a time yet when you could work with people over Zoom. You needed an office that people had to come to. And so, but in coaching, you get paid cash up front. And so by adding coaching, which for most therapists was like tying their hand behind their back and closing one eye, coaching was so much easier than therapy.
Mm.
And they were coaching executives who were trying to grind the wheels with people around a boardroom, and that took like a month. And then they learned their communication tools or whatever, active listening, whatever they didn't have. And they're off and running, and they earned $1,000 or $1,500. And so initially, coaching augmented their ability to practice as therapists. And then some found they preferred it. It was faster, it got results faster, and it's cash on the barrelhead. If you've sunk $250,000 a year in an executive that's not performing, paying someone $2,500 to straighten him out makes good business sense. And so I think there were economic drivers that expanded that too, because if you were counting on insurance reimbursement, you might have gone out of business as a therapist. And so, I saw a therapist once who asked me this question, and I ended up asking her a question I'd never thought I'd ask someone. So I think both areas will open you up in different ways. So she asked me the question, why is it your job to take care of all the rest of your family? Your siblings are not your children. And I didn't realize I was doing that. I was supporting my, siblings as if they were my children. And I had a child, Brian, that I was supporting. And she said, why are you doing that? I'd never had that perspective before. And my question to her was, well, if I stop supporting my siblings in this way, won't I be a bad person? Like, isn't this something a good person does? I'd never examined it. I just took on this kind of role of Cinderella growing up in my household, and it just continued into my early adult life. And I never questioned it, but I was sitting across from someone who could question it with me. And so I think I was working with a coaching client, and he was unwinding a difficult um, relationship with a very powerful business person who was reneging on all their promises with the company that got started. And he was a co-founder, and he was struggling with, how do I get this person who has $1,000 lawyers, to keep the agreement we made, even though it's in writing. We worked that out. They kept the agreement. And if you get some things lined up, solution oriented wise, in your business, in your workplace, you now have breathing room to ask other questions about your life in general. And so, with this business tangle untangled and the round of money redistributed that should have happened, this client had breathing room to go talk to a therapist about a difficult divorce situation that he was in and a custody battle. And the first question that therapist asked this former coaching client was, well, are your needs being met? And this grown man had never asked that question. Like, what are you talking about? My needs being met. My job is to meet the needs of a now angry, divorcing me wife and the children. What do you mean my needs are being met? Like, what even is that? So that's a question a therapist would ask. And if you've maybe solved some of the things that are keeping your roof over your head and your children fed and so on, you might have room to sit down with a therapist and unwind. I have all this resentment with my father. How do I get rid of it? How do I release it? And what is this my needs being met thing all about? What is this? So I think there's a place for both. And economic drivers have encouraged therapists to work in coaching. But I support people who are doing both or one or the other. I think the circumstances, what are we trying to solve? What is your timeline? What is your budget? Does the insurance cover anything? Coaches don't take insurance. They take cash. They take your credit card and process it. So that might mean you need to start in an area where you have economic support in exploring something, and you may not have that in coaching. So yeah, and we've seen quite a dynamic change, a very big growth in coaching, even among therapists. Did you have more thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, yeah. I like a lot of what you're getting into there. So, and again, I support anything that's positive for the individual. Okay, it's gonna sound like I'm talking crap about therapists again, but I support anything that's positive for the individual. So, if you have a good therapist, you go to them, and that feels really good to you, and you're making progress, then I totally support it. Um, but counterpoint, and again, I'm not trying to sound like I'm so against it, but counterpoint, I've heard one therapist, I watched a video of one therapist saying that actually one of the number one, I guess, cofactors with depression, like things that is always there simultaneously with depression, is rumination.
Yes.
And so that's actually one of the things that can actually be a problem in therapy is if you keep ruminating on the same problems from your past, it's like you're always reopening the wound. You're always kind of like going back to those emotions. If you can resolve it, that's good. But like, what if you don't? I mean, sometimes if you keep focusing on it, you keep reopening the wound. It might not actually be helpful. Another thing that I've seen happen is some people pay for a therapist just to go there to have someone tell them that nothing is their fault.
Yes.
This is going on now.
Yes.
And there are therapists who have realized they can make a lot of money telling people, yeah, nothing's your fault. That was your ex. They were doing everything wrong. You're good. Like, oh, that was your parents, that was your siblings. They messed you up. It wasn't your fault. Nothing is your fault. So some people go there and they come out feeling really good about themselves, like nothing's my fault. I'm just awesome. So again, but I think this really ties into the issue of always choose someone that you resonate with,
Yes.
whether it's a therapist, whether it's a coach, because there's people that do those kinds of things. Is that really helping this person develop their character or a proper understanding of life when the therapist is just telling them everything is everyone else's fault? No. It might make you feel good temporarily, but some people go to therapy just to get that little boost,
Yes.
that little emotional boost of, well, I feel better now because nothing's my fault. Like, so every therapist is different, every coach is different. So just, choose someone that you resonate with. And then, Dean, going back into what you were talking about, as far as what do women generally get out of therapy? I'm not a woman, so I can't really say, but just the differences between what men get out of it and what women get out of it. One thing that might be involved with why women go to therapy more, and again, I'm not a woman, but is I think, um, just to generalize here, men might say what's on their mind more directly and clearly more often than women do. So a therapist is an opportunity for a woman to like really speak her mind and not censor it at all, to like try to protect other people's feelings. And I'm just going to say maybe, I don't know, but just to generalize, maybe in general, women do that more than men do. So the therapist is like a unique opportunity to just really just unload. Like, I'm just going to say what I really think here, how I really feel. I don't have to protect anyone's feelings. And that is like a huge sense of relief.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that may be one reason why like it appeals to women more. And again, just generalizing. Um, but I do think like if therapists or coaches give people more life strategies or communication strategies, I think that is more useful long term. So it's like the saying, teach a man to fish instead of just catching a fish and giving it, you
Mhm.
know, to the man. Like it's if you're working with someone who's teaching you things that you can use for the rest of your life,
Mhm.
I think that's very valuable. That's like definitely worth it. Like whether it's communication strategies in relationships, whether it's strategies to advance your career, whether it's how to handle a business problem,
Mhm.
how to manage your emotions. If it's something you can do long term, that's very valuable. And I think that has a lot more value than just you go to an office and you vent for an hour. And
Mhm.
again, some people might need that and really value that for a certain period of time.
Mhm.
But I think stuff that you can use long term is a lot more valuable. um, but I do think whatever gives you your next level of personal growth is very much worth pursuing. Whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach, whether that's reading a book, whether that's prayer, whether that's meditation, whether it's going on a retreat. Like, if you really genuinely feel and think and believe that something is going to really help you develop and give you that long term value, I encourage people to do anything that fits with that mold. Um, Another thing that's going on, especially with couples therapy, and I've seen a lot of stories with this, is, and Dean, this gets back into what you're saying about some men being nervous to go to a therapist. This is a different reason. Some people are trying to use therapists as a weapon, like in a couples situation. This has been going on now as well.
Mhm.
Um, so like if, husband and wife are going through a divorce, one person will go try to pick out a therapist that they feel like agrees with their side more. And then they suggest, let's go to this therapist for couples counseling. And then the other person in the relationship goes in there and they feel like they get ambushed. Like the therapist is telling, let's say the man, like you're wrong about everything. You need to listen to her more. You need to treat her better. There's stories of that going on as well. So um, just things to be aware of that I would add to the discussion here.
I have some
Yeah.
feedback real quick. A team of women and I, a couple of years ago, put on a women's leadership luncheon. And there's a book out that talks about the 12 things that women executives do and how to stop doing them so that they can be more effective at work. These are very unconscious, women specific things. And it's kind of the unconscious default of men in the room and of women in the room. And one example was we asked, how many of you ruminate about things happening at work? 75% of the hands went up of these women leaders. And it's kind of a default process that women want context, They want to femsplain, as Brian does. They want to explain more. No, but wait, you need to know last Tuesday, the same thing happened. Now they have a 15-minute setup to what they want to tell you. And sometimes men are exhausted 10 minutes in to the 15-minute setup so that you really understand why it mattered. And so we do speak differently, listen differently, engage differently. Here's an example, one of the rules, and we don't think about this. It's unconsciously driven from our gender roles that are 1,000 years old, okay? If there's one woman sitting at the conference table and there's 8 or 10 other men in the room, and it's time to go get the lunch that's being delivered, the men look at the woman and assume she's going to get up and go get the lunch. They just default to that because their mom always brought lunch and their wife brings lunch, whatever. And the woman has to politely say, Bob is closer to the door. Bob, would you go get the lunch? To snap them out of the unconscious. Well, you're the only one in a skirt here, so you should go get the lunch. No, I'm the same as you. Bob's closer to the door. Bob, would you mind getting the lunch? Oh, and they catch themselves in that. So these things really happen, but also men may not want to, in the business meeting, hear the 15-minute setup about why now you're presenting this new strategy. They want you to just get to it. And so learning how to interact in those different ways, because men and women are not the same. And in a corporate environment, those differences are sometimes exasperating for people who don't know how to, navigate that. I think it's really important. Dean, I wanted to go back to your discussion of, well, but the state has ordained that these people can do this. In one that same ICF Austin meeting that I was in, where they talked about, hey, 50% of the new certified coaches are currently acting as therapists, and they're doing both for economic reasons and to open up an executive coaching market, that kind of thing. A woman stood up and said, I have 16 years of schooling. And in the coaching realm, I'm competing with people that took a 3-month course, and we are not the same. I have 16, she was mad. I have 16 years of schooling. And I'm thinking, it's not our fault that this societal change is happening. It's not our fault that you can't get insurance reimbursements anymore. It's not our fault that you're in a beautiful, expensive office you can't afford right now. And so you're having to take on coaching clients and then compete with coaches who don't have 12 or 14 or 16 years of experience in certifying yourself in certain kinds of things. So people that have been in that system a long time have anger and resentment that the world is changing so fast. Wait a minute, I paid my dues. Who are these yahoos over here that are charging $1,000 a month? They've been in business 10 minutes. And so I think there's, legitimate feelings across the spectrum. The last thing I want to say is people take away from coaching sessions, take away from therapy sessions what they heard. That may not be what was completely said. That may not have been the message. So I was talking in a discovery phone call, as you mentioned, Dean, when you talk to people first about, does it make sense for us to work together? This person was looking for a job, and then again, after the business problem, mentioned that he also had a personal problem that he would want to bring into the coaching. And he said, my wife of 10 years has cheated on me, and she's in therapy. And the therapist said it was okay because she just needed to feel validated. And so she's now off the hook, according to the therapist, because she just needed to feel validated. And now she wants both of us to go talk to this therapist. And I think this is going to be a great big waste of time, because you don't get to violate our marriage vows and our agreement because you weren't feeling validated. And who was not validating her? Me, of course. This is my fault that she wasn't feeling validated. What am I supposed to do about this? I think some people bring from a meeting, well, I have permission because she said I needed validation. That might not have been what the therapist said. And I said, go hear for yourself. Go to the meeting and hear for yourself, because you're getting her version, which puts her as the not the wrong party, in her infidelity. Go hear for yourself. But I think sometimes clients would say, I hear you in my head. I'm wondering, what is my next choice? I think this is what you would say. And now in our meeting, is that what you would have said? Like, have I got you dialed into my head and like, oh, you have a Myrna voice in your head now. So, yeah, sometimes what people report is the part they heard because it agreed with their orientation already to whatever they're working on. Dean, you have some thoughts?
Yeah. Um, an analogy might be useful for thinking about therapy versus coaching.
Mhm.
So imagine that you have some kind of chronic disease and it does not necessarily getting worse quickly, but it's not getting any better either. And you go to, you start at your family doctor and she refers you to a specialist, and then you drive to the next biggest city where you see the specialist who gives you some tests, and you kind of get on the medical treadmill and end up buying a bunch of drugs that you take. And okay, so you could do that. That is an option for your healing. Okay. And that whole sort of conventional medical system is analogous to therapy.
Yes.
You could also treat your chronic illness by going to an herbalist, going to someone who does ear candling. Um,
A
the
naturopath who cleans up your diet.
Yes, go to one of the people who does the thing where they think they're drawing toxins out of your feet by giving you like a extended foot bath. There are all these other sort of natural, purported therapies. Now, that's coaching. So the advantage to going to therapy or to going to is the same as going to conventional medical doctors. It's predictable. It operates within a kind of ideological or philosophical framework that's clear and understandable. It's more or less consistent from doctor to doctor in terms of how doctors are trained to approach disease. So you go to a doctor in your hometown, you're going to get sort of hear something similar to what you hear if you go to a doctor in Alaska. Okay. The problem is that it doesn't necessarily work. And so when you step outside of that, what you're giving up is you're giving up the state endorsement in the sense of like the state has looked at this and said this is safe, this is good, this is
Mhm,
whatever. This
mhm,
is the standard procedure.
mhm.
So you're giving that up, and you're taking on some like maybe you're taking on some higher level of risk. It's who knows, maybe you're not.
Mhm.
But you're at least taking on greater responsibility for yourself to decide what works for you. So you're
Yeah.
taking on a higher level of agency with regard to your own growth, development, healing, etc.
Mhm.
Now, what you're gaining for that by stepping outside of the conventional system is a whole other array of possible approaches to your issues
Mhm.
that can't be contained in the state approved ideological approach that you find in conventional medicine. So that's somewhat analogous, I think, to therapy versus coaching. Is that, if you go to therapy, you're going, which is again fine and good, and I'm not against it at all. But you're going to find people who have been trained similarly, who have a kind of a uniform, like a uniform code in the DSM, where they're going to have to give you some diagnosis and give that to the insurance company, etc.
Mhm.
Out, you step outside of that into sort of seeking other paths for growth, healing, whatever, development. You're going to have a much wider array of people. I mean, even in a life design, there are multiple approaches to helping
Yeah.
people grow.
Yeah.
And you can sample from those, but it does require a higher level of agency on the part of the person to decide what works for them and what doesn't. And
Yeah.
so maybe part of the difference between therapy and coaching, one of the many differences, is that coaching uses a wider array of approaches and requires a higher level of agency on the part of the client to determine for him or herself what works and what is good,
Yeah,
what
no,
makes them feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go back to that quote from earlier that engaging your own agency, embracing your own understanding of what is working for you in the laboratory of your individual life. And for some people, they don't want to have that level of personal responsibility. They want to go to a therapist because that's what everybody does. And their doctor recommended this person, so we're sure they're fine. And so for some people, they don't want that level of personal responsibility, and that's okay. For other people, they say, I'm going to try three things, then I'm going to do the thing that works best for me. That's a level of agency. So, yeah, we love the different people on our team of coaching here at A Life Designed. And down below, we'll have a list of challenges that we're offering. Little $12 4-week challenges where you can try different things like journaling or like manifestation and meditation or like how to turbocharge your goals. So different kinds of things you can try. Look below and sample, some coaching things that for right now, for what you need might be just right. And we encourage you to use your own agency in a time of great societal change where things are in such a state of flux and churn. You really do have to kind of step up a little and say, I need to figure out what works for me and do that. And a time of trust the experts. And I'm just going to get in the same line everybody else is in because it's probably safe. Some of those things are coming undone. So everyone needs to do what's best for them. And please explore your options. Coaching and therapy might be the answer. Coaching or therapy might be the answer. And your needs are going to change over time. So, Brian, tell us how to get a hold of you.
Let me add a couple of final thoughts here, and
Sure.
then I'll do that. So I saw one video with a therapist, and she was saying that she noticed if she tries to hold her clients accountable and say like, well, I think you're the problem in this situation, that she would just lose clients.
Right.
That they're just not coming back.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the thing. I think a lot of therapists have learned, yeah, you're a licensed therapist, but you kind of have to tell these people what they want to hear
Mhm.
because they don't want to pay you $200 a session to
Mhm.
have you basically tell them they're the problem.
Mhm.
There's, even though that is the real work that's supposed to happen, right? For
Mhm.
us to actually grow and learn and build character and improve ourselves,
Mhm.
there's still an issue there of like, do you really want me to pay you $200 just so you can blame everything on me? Like, I don't want to come back. That's a fundamental
Mhm.
issue with the business model there. And this is also why I think we need to sort of start creating new business models
Mhm.
for these things. We're kind of exploring that here at Web Design.
Mhm.
Because for certain industries, there's a misalignment of incentives and the business model doesn't really work. I mean, it's also a problem in the conventional healthcare system. A patient cured is a customer lost.
Yes.
So they don't actually have financial incentive to heal you.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to heal you out of the goodness of their hearts, but that's not how they make their money.
Yes.
So we have to start exploring like how can we align the incentives here? Um, one of the things we put on the website was that in ancient Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine culture, they had it set up to where you would pay your doctor like a weekly or a monthly fee when you were healthy, and you stopped paying once you got sick. So the doctor had to cure you to start getting the small amount you paid per week or per month back again.
A reverse
So
incentive. Yeah.
yeah, and that actually aligned the incentives correctly
Mhm.
to where I want my healing and you also want my healing because that's what benefits us.
Mhm.
So I think we have to look at that with things like therapy and conventional medicine. We have to be aware of that. And then just on a funny note, I saw a video the other day, and this woman made the argument. She's like, if you're going to date in New York, she's like, a therapist is required. That's like a prerequisite. If you're going to be dating out here, Like, there's no way to do it without a
To
therapist. So,
process the experiences, you need a professional to help you navigate.
yeah.
That's so funny.
So, just a funny way to end it. But yeah, you can reach me at alifedesign.org. Excuse me. Or Special K Coaching on Instagram.
Oh, very good. Okay, good. And you have a challenge coming up. So if they go to alifedesign.org/challenge, they'll find the 10 challenges that we're offering. Yours is helping people make their dreams come true.
I
So a
can, yeah.
great 4-week challenge. Okay. Dean, final thoughts and how do we get a hold of you?
Well, we mentioned rumination a couple times. I thought I'd just end with a little rumination tip. So if we have people who are, trying to go to the movies, and in the middle of the movie they start thinking about what happened last week at work, and then they keep thinking about it, and then they get into their feelings, and it's upsetting, and they can't watch the movie, and that's not an atypical ruminative situation.
Mhm,
I recommend that that person get a journal,
mhm,
and that this person write down in as much detail as they can tolerate what happened in this incident they want to ruminate about.
mhm,
At the very least, then, when you're at the movie and you start to think about it, you tell yourself, actually, right now I'm going to enjoy the movie. And when I get home tonight, I will read over my entry and I will relive this as many times as I want to. And I will feel as terrible about it as I want to. And then I will go from there. But right now, I'm just going to watch this movie.
mhm,
And I feel like that's probably a very useful way for people to break that ruminative pattern. If you know, I have a record of this event, I don't need to relive it because I can relive it on a better schedule. So you're not trying don't you, so you try to break the pattern of reliving it at all by just breaking the pattern of reliving it in the moment because you have the security of knowing I'm not going to forget it. I've written it down. It's right there. So I would recommend that for rumination. Um, you asked me
How to get a hold of you?
how to get a hold of me.
Mhm,
DNabbit.com. There's a services tab there. People can find out about what I
mhm.
do, and also at DNabbit on Twitter.
Very good. And you have an upcoming challenge too about journaling.
Journaling, yeah.
Yep. It's so powerful when you don't have a way to process what's going on for you. And I've heard people say, honey, you can talk to me about anything as long as you don't talk to me about Bob at work. Like I'm so over Bob at work. And so you're just grinding that bone and you just won't let go of it. Put that in your journal. I've heard enough. I can't do anything about it. I can't listen to it anymore. So a journal is a really great way to just get it out of your system and process it.
Mhm.
And then take yourself to a place of, okay, I'm ready to hire a coach. I'm ready to work with a therapist because I'm going to solve my Bob problem.
Mhm.
But yeah, you kind of have to get the splinter out, before the healing can start. And journaling is a great way, so that you're not kind of overburdening the other people in your life with this, grinding away at a constant familiar problem. So, I love the journaling challenge. I love the Make Your Dreams Come True challenge. Those are going to be excited. So we encourage people to visit alifedesign.org and look at the About page and see our lineup of coaches and think about putting some of our team in your corner. So until next time, thank you so much for
Thank
watching.
you.